So even a blind squirrel finds a nut once in a while. And that's what happened. I stumbled upon it. Not that I'm a regular 60 Minutes watcher, but a lot of people were bugging me on social media about this last night. By the way, I'm Pete Mundo. KCMO Talk Radio in Kansas City is where you hear me in the mornings. I'm in for Vince Coglianese on a Monday afternoon. Great to be here with our Washington, D.C. audience. So my ex starts getting all these DMs at Pete Mundo. You can find me there. I've already got a couple of Facebook messages from you. You can find me on there as well, Pete Mundo on KCMO Talk Radio. Justin dropped me a note saying, take it easy on us Commanders fans being in Kansas City. Hey, your future's bright. Okay, I like your quarterback. The future's bright. Only one direction to go. You could be the Giants right now, so listen, it's getting better. It's getting better. I knew you guys could handle it. That's why I made a brief Chiefs-Commanders joke last hour. But anyway, 60 Minutes did a really good piece last night about the University of Austin, known as UATX. And if you're somebody who, like me, my kids are young. I mean, they're a decade plus away from going to college. They'll be 6, 3, and 8 months, so I've got a ways to go. But if you got kids who are going to college, maybe they're in college, maybe they're recently graduated from college, or grandkids in that spot, you want to know that they can go to a place where they'll get a good education. They can meet people of different backgrounds, people of different life experiences. And, yeah, they're going to hear from people who they don't agree with. But that's important. What's also important is that if their values and their opinions are different, they can feel the freedom to express those as well. That they're not stuck in some woke indoctrination center. And unfortunately, that's what too much of higher education has become. So you've got universities out there trying to change that narrative. And you've got this University of Austin known as UATX, which started classes this fall with a say anything, shout nothing philosophy. Their motto is the pursuit of truth. And as one of the pieces from last night goes on to note here, and I think it's a very valuable piece that will play in Cut 1, and that is DEI being swapped for MEI, merit, excellence, and intelligence. What a novel concept. Let's roll Cut 1.
As for admissions, UATX swaps DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, for what some call MEI, merit, excellence, and intelligence.
Gender, race, ethnicity, what is the factor of that in your admissions decisions?
We don't take any of that into consideration in admissions. The primary thing that we're interested in is the mind.
Meaning what?
The kind of capacity to think deeply, to answer questions, to challenge norms.
I got to tell you, we did not see a particularly diverse student body.
We are putting resources into finding talent of an intellectual variety. And if you're interested in diversity, I recommend you look at the social backgrounds of our students, at the family circumstances of our students.
High-profile UATX donors include Trump-backing billionaire Bill Ackman, a Harvard grad who vocally criticized his school after October 7th, and Harlan Crow, close friend of conservative Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. Critics attack UATX as a right-wing university simply wearing the cloak of free speech.
I love that. Critics attack. Is that kind of like the experts during COVID? It's amazing how when they want to push back on the narrative in legacy media, they just use that phrase, experts say. Stop with the experts. Stop with the critics. Who are the critics? Like, find yourself a critic on 60 Minutes and put the critic on. But the whole thing of critics say or experts believe, it's all just such nonsense. But anyway, at least they did the piece. I give them credit where it's due. They did the piece on 60 Minutes highlighting UATX. And I love the part where the 60 Minutes interviewer, and I don't know which one this guy is because, like I said, 60 Minutes is not part of my regular Sunday watching. I've got 3 little kids, okay? I can bang my head against the wall all day, every day, and put a hole through the wall. I don't need to watch 60 Minutes to do it. But because this piece was unique and actually covering something of interest, I figured I'd watch it. And it was well done. But the guy who's interviewing for this piece on 60 Minutes goes on to, like, take a swipe, and he says, well, I don't see a lot of diversity around here. Because in their eyes, we're all just broken down by our race and by our gender. Yeah, there's only two. I know, shocker. Our sexual orientation. That's all we are to these people. Instead of saying, wow, two white people or two black people or two Asian people or two Latino people can have very different lived experiences. We are not simply segmented by our race and our gender. And this remains news to a lot of them. But just because you look around and you see something, whether it's at a university campus, whether it's at a workplace, whether it's anywhere else, it doesn't mean that all those people are just this monolithic group where they've all gone about their lives the same way. It's not true in the real world. It's not true in my world. It's not true in your world. But for 60 Minutes, they can't even cut through that. And let's not forget, too, the lawsuits that came to be in the last, year and a half or so, when what happened, which racial group was being discriminated against on college campuses when it came to admissions at some of the best institutions in the country. It was the Asian community. The Asian community that was being, unfortunately for them, not put into some of these top-tier institutions simply because they were Asian. They won those cases at the Supreme Court level. So when they talk about all this DEI and diversity stuff on these college campuses, which is still true for most college campuses, whether they want to admit it or not, it's a totally flawed concept. And it hurts some of the best students in the country who have busted their butts to try to get into these universities. Let's continue here. 60 Minutes last night, this piece on the University of Austin, known as UATX. They have swapped DEI for MEI, Merit, Excellence, and Intelligence. And I truly hope this is a model for universities that start popping up all over the country. Let's roll cut two.
We came across some data that less than 3% of the Harvard faculty identifies as conservative, more than 75% identifies as liberal. Wildly out of proportion with the American public.
There's a huge disconnect now between the academic elite and the average American voter.
Ferguson says this political imbalance, plus social media, plus an army of campus administrators monitoring speech, equals a culture where, per one study, nearly 80% of today's students self-censor on campus for fear of being ostracized. Faculty feels the chill, too.
The president of a university I won't name once told me that he received, on average, 1 email a day from a member of the university community calling for somebody else to be fired for something they'd said. That reminds me vividly of the bad old days of Stalin's Soviet Union, and yet it's happening on American campuses.
The stakes are that high.
I think if a university system starts to go wrong, then something is bound to go wrong for the society as a whole. The ideas that start on campus pretty quickly spread to corporations, to media organizations. University forms the way you think about the world for the rest of your life. If our universities are screwed up, and I believe they are, then that will screw up America as a whole quite quickly.
That is part of the 60-minute package on the University of Austin, which is becoming one of these colleges that is trying to spread its wings and not be a left-wing indoctrination center. And he's spot on to note there, the president, that the ideas that start on campus spread to corporations and to media organizations. And that's true. We've seen that in real life over the last, certainly, decade. It's been on steroids, but it's been going on for years and years and years before that, right? That's what's been happening. And that's why the University of Austin is an incredible model and is a threat to the mainstream left-wing ecosystem that exists in corporate America, in media organizations. It is a major threat to them. And it's also why the government, which has backed so many of these student loans and has done it wisely, right? There has been this push for a generation or two now that the only way you're going to make a great living, you got to go to college. You got to put yourself into debt because college. Well, college can be great. It was for me. I mean, I went to Villanova right up the road from you guys, had a great experience, and met a lot of really interesting people and wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today without that experience. But it doesn't need to be for everybody. It certainly doesn't need to be for somebody who knows what they want to do, who can go out into the real world, who can use their hands. I mean, I'm lucky to be able to screw in a light bulb on any given day, so I'm certainly not that guy. But if you have those talents, in large part, you don't need to go to college. And you're going to make a boatload of money in this economy anyway, because there is massive demand for those skills. And frankly, there's not enough people who are supplying those skill sets. So you don't need it. And you certainly don't need to go to these colleges to get indoctrinated, get some worthless liberal arts degree, and come out of there with 6 figures in debt and 0 job prospects because you have no skill sets that apply to the real world. So it does feel, and it's been happening really since COVID, but it does feel like that model is breaking. And it's not good because the Democratic Party in large part relied on that business model to create more voters, right? If they drive more people to colleges, they indoctrinate them properly, they get them into corporate America, they spread their DEI, all the, woke nonsense that we know is out there, media as well. And then for those that don't make it, for those that don't have success, they say, hey, don't worry, we're going to bail out your loans. It's gonna be great. Just keep voting for us. You got to put us in a lot of power, though, because it's going to be kind of, tough to get done. Joe Biden tried to do it without Congress. Backfired on him, but he tried to do it without Congress. Don't worry, we're here for you. So you see, they want to capture people while they're in college and then keep them a voter after college. That's the name of the game. Well, and I know it's not easy, but if you get more colleges with more backing from notable wealthy people like the Bill Ackmans of the world, who will fund places like the University of Austin, known as UATX, and they will just have, colleges where you are going to hear both sides of the political conversation. That's what it's all about. And that's why if you're a parent right now, if you are a grandparent right now and you've got kids approaching college or in college, it's something I think about, and my kids are a decade away, at least. 888-630-9625, 888-630-9625. Pete Mundo in for Vince Coglianese on WMAL. I mean, we've got colleges where I'm at. University of Kansas is considered very liberal. Great basketball, but considered very liberal in Lawrence, Kansas. University of Missouri. That's where the whole Michael Sam thing went down. You remember that from 10 years ago. Now, they've started to move away from a lot of that crazy, but it still does exist. And I know that that's true in your backyard as well, because it's true across so many of these college campuses, whether they're private, state-run. Maybe it's a little better in some of the state schools, but not necessarily. It oftentimes depends on where you are. So being cautious of that, being aware of that, I mean, I don't know about you, but I have no interest in working my tail off for 10 years, trying to, save some money and do what we can to get the girls, I've got 3 girls, into a decent college. And then after 4 years, have them be like, all right, Dad, I've come to the conclusion that you're a fascist Nazi. No, we're not going to play that game. Come home, for fall break the first year and blue hair, 7 piercings, and Dad's a Nazi. Yeah, we're not going to do that here, okay? So that's why you've got to be careful. And I know for many of you, with the kids closer to college than mine, it's something that's probably more top of mind. But even when I was doing the search for college, going back about 20 years now, it wasn't nearly the thing that it is today. 888-630-WMAL. I'm Pete Mundo. I am in for Vince Coglianese here on WMAL. It is great to be here on News Talk 105.9, where we're making sense of the news. And even 60 Minutes once in a while does know how to make sense of the news. I will give them that as much as I can. All right, let's continue. Here it is. Did I see this right? Oh, my goodness. This just coming down from Fox News. Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, threatens intervention if Trump kills Joe Biden's $7,500 electric vehicle tax credit. Yeah, Newsom saying in a statement today that he will offer the same EV rebate for Californians in the case that Trump gets rid of the credit. saying consumers continue to prove the skeptics wrong. Zero-emission vehicles are here to stay. Will intervene if the Trump administration eliminates the federal tax credit. Doubling down on our commitment to clean air and green jobs in California. Dude, you have just contradicted yourself. He said consumers continue to prove the skeptics wrong. First off, I'm not saying EVs are going anywhere. I wouldn't buy one. I wouldn't. Not my thing. I don't want to think about whether or not I charge my car for 7 hours before I get in it and try to go anywhere. But put that aside here for a second and just let's look at the situation as it currently exists. Okay? I mean, this is Gavin Newsom being a massive hypocrite. He says that consumers have proved the skeptics wrong. Do we really know that? Do we? Have you ever tried the EV thing without the credits, whether it's for the producer or the consumer? Not really. You haven't. So we don't really know what the free market would bear with these EVs. Hasn't stopped them before, but Gavin Newsom, as the Joker's been known to do, talking out of both sides of his mouth and making very little sense while he does it, which is really just another day that ends in Y. Tom Fitton, the president of Judicial Watch, is going to be here to talk about Jack Smith filing a motion to dismiss all charges against President Trump. How did this come about, and what does it mean? Tom Fitton next. Pete Mundo in for Vince Coglianese on WMAL. Pete Mundo filling in for Vince Coglianese here on WMAL. I host the morning show on KCMO in Kansas City. It's great to be here, filling in for Vince on a Monday afternoon, when we are thrilled to welcome on and say hello to Tom Fitton, president of Judicial Watch and the author of Rights and Freedoms in Peril, an investigative report on the left's attack on America. So, Tom, we appreciate you being here on WMAL. The news today, Jack Smith filing a motion to dismiss all charges against President Trump. What surprised you, if at all, about this news today?
Well, what's outrageous is it took so long. It's no surprise the public essentially vindicated Trump on Election Day, found him innocent in many ways by putting back in the presidency and rejected the lawfare. There was never any good faith basis to proceed, and he was facing significant hurdles. Jack Smith was with the constitutional decision by the Supreme Court that there were significant immunity issues from the get-go and everything he was doing against Trump. So this was a retaliatory prosecution about nothing, and it should die a death and never come back again. And even though Jack Smith is trying to work it so that somehow it might come back after Trump leaves office, but I don't think that's going to work in the end.
Now, how is he trying to do that?
Well, he wants it to be dismissed without prejudice, and you don't have to be a lawyer to understand that means that it can come back. If it's dismissed with prejudice, it means it can't come back.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully President Trump, once he becomes president, can really make sure it doesn't come back or issue appropriate pardons to ensure that he's protected and other Americans are protected, because it's not just him who's been abused by Jack Smith, but other innocent Americans as well. Heck, I was brought in as a witness to the grand jury. They harassed me for 4 hours. I want justice. And frankly, this should be the beginning, not the end, of accountability for the gang that targeted Trump from the White House on down.
So what would that look like when you talk about Donald Trump getting in there, cleaning all this up? Of course, we've talked about whether it was Matt Gaetz and now likely to be Pam Bondi, cleaning up the DOJ. What does that look like specifically once Donald Trump gets in there and his people get confirmed come January?
Well, there's all sorts of policy and process issues they can address in the Justice Department. It's a corrupted organization, so it needs to be cleaned house just administratively. But in terms of these abuses of power, there should be a criminal investigation. I mean, if they were targeting someone, as we suspect, not because they did anything wrong, but in retaliation for political activity, First Amendment protected activity, that would be a crime, and those involved should be questioned about it.
Mm-hmm. So, and that is something that can happen right out of the gates. I mean, what is a realistic timeline on all these things happening once Donald Trump gets back in there?
Well, if I were Trump, I'd do it from the get-go, appoint a prosecutor, doesn't have to be a special prosecutor, but ensure there's an independent entity investigating what went on in this Justice Department. Remember, they didn't want to move against Trump, and they were forced to by the Biden White House. And I tell you, if it was politics behind this, if it was just retaliation, the courts already found that Jack Smith was unconstitutionally appointed. The courts already found the charges he was pursuing, or key parts of the pursuit, were constitutionally wanting. So there's lawlessness confirmed, and the question is what accountability should be there for that. And if we're going to have a system that works, prosecutors who abuse their power to target people, to deprive them of their civil rights, which is what they did to Trump, need to be held accountable. And there's no immunity for that.
Do you see a situation? I mean, I think we all know how this is going to play out from a media perspective, and that's where I want to get your next thoughts here, Tom. The media, when Trump gets in there and hopefully does exactly what you're explaining here, they're going to say that he's suddenly weaponizing the Justice Department, and oh my goodness, this is the craziest thing ever. Do you see that coming, Tom? And if so, what's the simple response to it?
Well, the media is just a voice for the abusers. They were co-conspirators. So, of course, they're going to object to it because they were involved in it. And they know what was done wrong because they were getting illegal leaks and other heads up as to what was going on. So it's kind of like the crooks saying, don't investigate us. The media is part of the conspiracy.
And when it comes to Pam Bondi in particular, Tom, and obviously knowing that she is someone who Donald Trump has used before in a private capacity and trusts, is this someone who you think is up to the job, up to the task in overseeing and running this DOJ and cleaning up some of the things that you've been talking about here on the show?
I do think she is, but I don't trust the Justice Department to investigate the Justice Department. There's no slur or lack of distrust in Pam Bondi because she can't. If she's picking folks in the Justice Department to investigate the Justice Department, we know how that's going to work. There should be an investigation from outside the Justice Department. It's a bigger issue than just the Justice Department. It's an issue about how there was collaboration and collusion between Democratic Party operatives and politicians throughout the country to target Trump and his supporters over their daring to dispute an election.
Mm-hmm. So who would that be? Would that be would that be Congress, or who would that entail if it's not a?
I might be I might be the skunk at the party as to what should be done because people don't want to hear what ought to be done. But I think the president should appoint a special prosecutor out of the White House.
Is there someone you have in mind for that?
The prosecutor should report to the president.
Yeah.
Of course, and that's been done before, and he should do it now.
Mm-hmm. Someone you want to see do that, Tom?
We know how it's what?
Someone you want to see do that? Someone you think would be good for that spot?
No, there are many people who could be on that list, some of whom have been mentioned for Attorney General and others who haven't, but would be effective special prosecutors.
Jack Smith. We are talking about the Jack Smith case, of course, with Tom Fitton on WMAL. Pete Mundo filling in for Vince Coglianese. So the timing of this, I mean, is this one of those things that you think we were just waiting, or they were waiting for Thanksgiving week, dump it now on a Monday of a holiday week, no one's really paying attention, try to slide this thing under the rug? Is that how and why you think this played out the way it did, Tom?
Yeah, I think your analysis of the timing is correct. And remember, Jack Smith isn't shutting down. He's still probably working on this smear job report on what he's done in order to harass Trump further. I don't know what's going on with the case in the 11th Circuit where he was found to be unconstitutionally appointed. But, in the end, the writing's on the wall, Pete, right? These cases are ending, and it's just a question of how much extra pain they can cause Trump as they go out the door or kicked out the door.
I don't want to do the what if, but had Donald Trump not won, I mean, what do these cases then look like going into 2025 when it comes to how much legal peril, financial peril he would have been facing had he not won the election? It does sound like a banana republic when you set it up that way, Tom, but I think it's a realistic question that potentially could have come to fruition.
Well, they wanted him in jail, and the Democratic Party wanted to deprive him of Secret Service protection when he was in jail. So he probably would have died in jail if he hadn't won the election.
Absolutely crazy. All right, Tom, what are we watching here then going forward? You mentioned how it's technically not closed. I mean, they could come after Trump if he's or when he's out of office come 2029, I guess that would be. But is the story now done, or is there something else that you're going to be watching beyond what Donald Trump does with his oversight of the DOJ when he gets in there in January?
Well, the left isn't going to stop, right? And, the
Yeah.
best way to figure out what's going to happen in the future is look what happened in the past. And the last time he came in, they constructed a set of circumstances that led to an appointment of a special counsel to harass him and his associates. So what's going to happen, I suspect, is that they are planning, and they're probably already manufacturing charges and allegations to warrant further investigation of Trump World. And they might not be able to target Trump specifically because of the new protections or the recognized protections now the Supreme Court has ruled. But his family, people like Elon Musk, others who are in Trump's orbit, you can be sure the deep state will target even more aggressively. And those who Trump appoints needed to be on the watch and kind of squelch what are obviously going to be more political investigations and harassment by the deep state.
Last thing I want to ask you, Tom, I want to play cut 6 on our cut sheet. This is Congressman Dan Goldman on CNN reacting to this. I want to get Tom Fitton's response to this from Congressman Dan Goldman. Let's roll cut 6.
I think it is a shame for justice in this country. It establishes that Donald Trump is above the law. The Supreme Court put him above the law in that opinion that Paula just mentioned. But now he appears to escape full accountability for what were crimes charged by a grand jury. And I would just add one other thing that we ought to pay close attention to. We cannot normalize the fact that Donald Trump, as the president-elect, should not be held accountable for crimes that he committed before.
All right, New York Congressman Dan Goldman there on CNN. Tom Fitton, figuratively speaking, of course, slap him around a little bit for me.
Well, that was just baloney. There weren't any crimes. If you look at the indictments, any normal person looking at the indictments would have found he was being prosecuted for the non-crime of objecting to the elections has candidates since the beginning of our country. There was nothing new that Trump said or did as it relates to objecting to elections that raised any questions about legality. So he was prosecuted for non-crimes. And what's concerning is that it got as far as it did. Indeed, he was convicted for non-crimes up in New York. That's the danger to the rule of law. So any check on that, contrary to someone who's directly involved in these abuses over the course of his career, Dan Goldman, remember before that he was part of the impeachment coup cabal against Trump in order to protect Joe Biden from his criminality being exposed. But any check on that is a victory for the rule of law. Is this the best possible outcome? No, but it's a big step towards that final outcome of accountability, and hopefully we get a system in place that stops abusing people based on their political beliefs as opposed to any actual crimes they committed.
Well said. Tom Fitton, you know him well, president of Judicial Watch. Of course, his book, Rights and Freedoms in Peril, an investigative report on the left's attack on America. Tom, thanks so much for being here on WMAL. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Pete. Happy Thanksgiving.
You as well. Tom Fitton, good to have him on the show. Appreciate him. I'm filling in, of course, for Vince Coglianese. I host mornings on KCMO in Kansas City. So speaking of all this, I do wonder if we did not have the alternative media that exists today. And that's not just talk radio. Talk radio is kind of the original, of course, counterculture to the media. But now, of course, with social media, digital media, YouTube shows, clips on X, everything that you've seen, does Donald Trump win? And how does that potentially change the legal standing that he finds himself in today? With the case being dismissed, of course. But if he didn't win, as Tom said, they were trying to put him in jail. So I want to play this clip for you that really stood out to me today. The CEO of Axios having a meltdown over Elon Musk thinking X is the new media. Cut 9.
Everything we do is under fire. Elon Musk sits on Twitter every day, or X today, saying like, we are the media, you are the media. My message to Elon Musk is, bullshit. You're not the media. You having a blue check mark, a Twitter handle, and 300 words of cleverness doesn't make you a reporter any more than me looking at your head and seeing that you have a brain and telling you I have an awesome set of tools makes me a damn neurosurgeon, right? Like what we do, what journalists do, what you did in Mississippi, what Al Jazeera does in the Middle East. You don't proclaim yourself to be a reporter. Like that's nonsense. Like being a reporter's hard, really hard. You have to care. You have to do the hard work. You have to get up every single day and say, I want to get to the closest approximation of the truth without any fear, without any favoritism. You don't do that by popping off on Twitter. You don't do that by having an opinion. You do it by doing the hard work.
Oh, my gosh. You'd think these folks are digging ditches. Oh, my goodness. Easy does it. That's the CEO of Axios having a meltdown over Elon Musk suggesting X is the new media. Here's the thing. If you guys didn't blow at your jobs, people wouldn't think that. Tom Fitton is right when he notes how the media was basically colluding with the Democratic Party on some of these charges against Donald Trump. And if you did not have a different media ecosystem to right some of the wrongs, correct some of the inaccurate reporting, flat-out lies that were being thrown out there, who knows how the election turns out differently, and who knows how Donald Trump's life turns out differently. And because you've got this perfect storm, right, where technology is just happening so quickly, and yes, you can be a citizen journalist in today's climate. You can be. Combine that with massive mistrust of the legacy media, and that's how you get this kind of thinking. Now, trust me, there's a ton of quacks on X or Facebook or anywhere on social media. You do have to be careful. I mean, I got people sending me DMs on X all the time. Oh, did you see this? Yeah, that's not true. So I get it. You have to be careful. But at the same time, to suggest that, oh, how dare you, these journalists work so hard and they're the hardest. No one works as hard as journalists. Oh, boy, these guys and gals, they really put their effort in everything. Calm down. Please calm down. You're going to blow out your back. You're patting yourself on the back so hard there. If you guys continued to have some semblance of trust, people would not have been seeking other options. That is the marketplace at work. And especially over the last 10 years, you guys failed the American people. And I'm saying you guys, speaking of the media apparatus at large. Pete Mundo here for Vince Coglianese on WMAL 888-630-WMAL to join us on News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. We still have an hour left with you as we roll through the show on this afternoon. Well, the big news here in town, Joe Biden granting clemency to Peach and Blossom at the annual White House turkey pardon. Big stuff, weighing in at 41 and 40 pounds. Hatched in Minnesota, rode the gravy train to Washington over the weekend, and Biden gave him a pardon on the way out the door. So I know, big news. Nick in Percival, what do you got for us as the hour wraps up real fast?
Pete, I'm skeptical about these turkey pardons. You know, they're sending them back to a turkey farm that raises turkeys for food. Are they going to segregate them and, you know, have a vet visit them? I suggest that they send them to a backyard in Arlington, Virginia, and monitor them and their health. And I want Vivek and Elon to dig into this, look into this turkey and see how much stuffing's in it.
Yeah, I'm good with that, man. Also, no one's asked the turkeys their gender, so we got to figure out where they feel comfortable being as they head on back home. Stuff's getting complicated out there. It really is. Coming up, we are going to have a great conversation and talk about what exactly is going on when it comes to illegal migrants and whether or not they're less likely to commit crime. John Lott, president of the Crime Prevention Research Center, next.